I'm Eddie Lawrence, and this is the Ready for Eternity podcast, a podcast and blog exploring biblical truths for inquisitive Bible students. Steel cages still hang from a church tower in Münster, Germany. 500 years ago, they held the mutilated bodies of men who dared to defy both Catholic and Protestant authorities. Their crime? Refusing infant baptism, rejecting political power, and insisting that following Jesus meant radical obedience, even to death. The year was 1525, and Europe buzzed with religious upheaval. Martin Luther had already nailed his thesis to the Wittenberg door 8 years earlier. Reformers across Europe challenged Catholic teachings and practices, yet in the Swiss city of Zurich, a group of believers, later known as Anabaptists, felt the Reformation wasn't going far enough. These men and women called themselves simply brethren. They embraced the Reformers' call to return to biblical Christianity. However, they believed reform was moving too slowly and compromised too much with worldly powers. On January 21st, 1525, these radical believers gathered at the fountain in the Zurich city square. George Blaurock, a former follower of the reformer Huldrych Zwingli, approached his friend Conrad Grebel with an extraordinary request. He asked Grebel to baptize him as an adult believer. This simple act defied centuries of church tradition. Both the Catholic Church and the emerging Lutheran congregations still practiced infant baptism. Grebel agreed. He baptized Blaurock by sprinkling water on his head. The other believers present followed suit, baptizing each other in turn. This marked the birth of the Anabaptist movement. Initially, these believers used sprinkling or pouring for their baptisms. Later, they adopted full immersion as the preferred method. They believed baptism should follow personal faith, not precede it. The other reformers quickly noticed these adult baptisms. They coined a derogatory term for the movement, Anabaptist, a word meaning rebaptizers. The name suggested these people baptized themselves again, invalidating their infant baptism. The Anabaptists rejected this label. They argued they weren't rebaptizing anyone. Instead, they performed the first true baptism for believers who had never been properly baptized as infants. Despite their protests, the name stuck. History remembers them as Anabaptist, though they preferred brethren or simply Christians. The Anabaptists went far beyond challenging baptism practices. They developed a comprehensive theology that shocked both Catholics and the emerging Reformed churches. First, they practiced radical discipleship. They believed Christians must follow Jesus' teachings strictly. This meant loving enemies, refusing to swear oaths, and sharing possessions with the needy. Second, they demanded complete separation of church and state. Unlike other reformers who sought government support, Anabaptists rejected all political power. They refused to hold office, serve in armies, or enforce civil laws. Third, they embraced pacifism as a core Christian principle. They wouldn't fight wars, even defensive ones. Violence contradicted Christ's teachings about loving enemies and turning the other cheek. Fourth, they practiced radical egalitarianism. Both men and women could preach and lead congregations. This scandalized a society that strictly limited women's religious roles. These beliefs made Anabaptists appear dangerously subversive to both religious and political authorities. They seemed to threaten the entire social order. Both Catholic and Reformed authorities moved quickly to crush the Anabaptist movement. They declared it heretical and outlawed Anabaptist gatherings. The punishment for joining the movement was death. The persecution that followed was brutal beyond imagination. Authorities burned Anabaptists at the stake. They drowned others in rivers, a cruel mockery of their baptism practices. Some victims were drawn and quartered. Others endured torture designed to force recantation. Church historian Justo Gonzalez notes that Anabaptist martyrs probably exceeded those killed during the 3 centuries of persecution before Emperor Constantine. This staggering loss occurred in just a few decades. The martyrs faced death with remarkable courage. They sang hymns while burning. They forgave their executioners. Their testimonies, carefully recorded, inspired future generations of believers. Not all Anabaptist groups remained peaceful. In the German city of Münster, followers of Melchior Hoffmann created a radical kingdom. Jan Matthijs and John of Leyden led Anabaptists who gained control of the city council in 1533. They expelled all non-Anabaptists and established what they claimed was a messianic kingdom. The community practiced polygamy and common ownership of goods under biblical justification. Catholic and Protestant armies surrounded the city in 1534, leading to a brutal siege. Münster fell in 1535, and the authorities tortured the Anabaptist leaders to death. They hung the leaders' bodies in steel cages from St. Lambert's church steeple as a warning. People later removed their bones, but the cages hang from the church steeple to this day. This violent episode damaged the reputation of all Anabaptists, even peaceful groups who rejected Münster's extremism. Despite intense persecution, some Anabaptist communities survived. They fled to remote areas where authorities couldn't easily reach them. They practiced their faith in secret, meeting in homes and forests. Over time, the movement split into various groups with slightly different emphasis. The most famous survivors include the Mennonites, named after Dutch leader Menno Simons. The Amish, led by Jacob Amon, separated from the Mennonites in the late 1600s. Both groups migrated to North America, seeking religious freedom. They established communities that preserved Anabaptist principles of pacifism, simple living, and adult baptism. The Anabaptists profoundly influenced Christianity despite their small numbers. They pioneered the concept of voluntary church membership based on personal faith. Anabaptists championed religious freedom and separation of church and state. They demonstrated that ordinary believers could study Scripture and form independent congregations. Today, millions of Christians practice adult immersion because of Anabaptist influence. Many independent congregations trace their baptismal practices to these brave 16th century reformers. The Anabaptists paid a terrible price for their convictions, yet their radical commitment to following Christ, regardless of consequences, changed Christianity forever.